here we are, Talbot Street.
Everybody's come through the doors of this building, haven't they? And all sorts of things.
Yeah, they've come through for the complaints, confessions to murder, and of course Jerry Hutch snuck in this building as well late at night one night and did an interview.
And flowers.
And flowers.
Don't forget the flowers, because we're going to tell all these stories at the Cork Podcast Festival, which is our show's actually on the 30th of March in the Opera House. Tickets are on sale from the corkpodcastfestival.ie, and they're selling fast. We've only got, 2 weeks left?
2 weeks left, yeah. So 2 people have now been sentenced to mandatory life imprisonment for the murder of a 66-year-old man at Sliabh Liag in Donegal. But we did hear from the sister of the victim, and at one point she describes how she felt his killer had mocked him during Garda interviews. So it was very a moving victim impact statement. Yeah. Tell us about the conviction that was received.
Yeah, so Alan Vial's a 39-year-old man and Nikita Burns would be in her 20s. She is a former partner of Alan Vial's, but 16 years his junior. So she was only 21 when this murder actually took place. So they were convicted of murdering Robert Wilkin in Sliabh Liag. Sliabh Liag is one of the tallest cliffs in Europe. It's known as a well-known beauty spot in Donegal, and he had been missing for 8 days, so his body was found in the sea beside there. It was basically thrown over a cliff by his 2 killers. I guess it's a complicated trial. Obviously, there was 2 people on trial for murder. They're former lovers, and they both tried to blame each other. So we can go back into the evidence, but essentially they were found guilty. They were given a life sentence. Yeah,
and Nikita Burns there's not many women convicted of murder in this state. I mean, the numbers are relatively small. So she'll join us a small group really of women sentenced to life in prison. Now, Robert Wilkin, the victim, he was a haulier. He was... it's a kind of a murky tale about what was the motive for this murder.
Yeah.
What do we know and what do we hear in court?
Yeah, so basically Robert Wilkin was from Tyrone in Northern Ireland, but had spent time living in England. And Alan Vial basically was described by his own defence as a sad, pathetic man. And he had been living in Australia, had a number of convictions in Australia and a lot in Ireland as well, and had come home he'd split up with his wife. Apparently the relationship ended due to a lot of drinking. He'd come home and he'd actually returned to a house he had in his native Killybegs, but it wasn't fit for living in, really. It was no electricity, no plumbing. It actually was heard how he had to go down to his brother's to have a shower. So he met Robert Wilkin in a pub. Robert Wilkin was living in his car at the time. This is about 6 months before the murder, and they struck up a friendship, and they were described as being seen together a lot. But they seemed to kind of be drinking a lot, and they were together a lot, but then they were also seen having fights, and one might slap the other and this kind of thing.
So there's a lot of chaos going on.
A lot of chaos.
And obviously the victim as well was facing serious drugs charges in the north as well.
Yeah. So he had been due to face trial when he was murdered. I think the charge was from 2021, but basically the police in Britain had charged him with having a lurry of trying to import drugs. He was caught in England with allegedly caught in England with a lurry that contained cannabis and cocaine hidden in chocolates.
Yeah, so probably a major haul, but I don't think, the belief would be that he was really the guy driving.
No.
rather than some sort of...
Exactly, yeah.
So there's people living this totally chaotic life, drinking a lot, in and out of each other's company. But how do we get to the point at which this man is murdered? Yeah,
so they had been living in this house, and he actually moved in, Robert Wilkin, because he said, I can help you with the garden and I'll show you how to do X, Y and Z. And then they started kind of getting paving jobs. So when they were living together, were socialising together, Robert Wilkin actually brought Nikita Burns into Alan Vial's life, it was described in court, and they struck up a relationship, and it basically described how they were sleeping together in court. So then she would do bits of work with them as well. So they were doing paving jobs, and she would move wheelbarrows and things like this. But then there was a lot of drinking at the same time. So as you said, they were getting by, but they were kind of living hand to mouth, and there was a lot of drinking. And essentially on the night that Robert Wilkin was murdered, they were in a pub with CCTV kind of showed, arguments. And they both told conflicting stories that, essentially they were in a car. They were after being in a pub all day. The car was being driven by Robert Wilkin. And Alan Vial, it has to be said, was proven to be a calculated liar, but he originally said that Robert Wilkin didn't like him slagging his driving, and that he claimed that Robert Wilkin turned around and started hitting him. A car was stopped, and Nikita Burns appeared at the window and beat Robert Wilkin with a rock. Now, she denied this. She said that it was actually the two men got involved in fracas, and Alan Wilkins actually hit him 6 or 7 times with a rock. So this is where the story gets, we can go into what they both tried to claim later, but essentially it was found that he died there, and then he was brought to Sliabh Liag, which was nearby.
So we know then that he's killed with a rock during, I suppose, a relatively minor sort of row, one way or another. There's no great motive or planning going on.
No.
So they drove him to this cliff, and basically they used it to dispose of the body. Now, it seems very, very haphazard, the plan they put into place.
Yeah, well, it's obviously, as it was said by the judge, that they were convicted in this joint enterprise, but they both entered into this agreement essentially, or that they both knew what was going to happen. But that can, as he described to the jury, that can take seconds. So, it doesn't mean that they had set out to do it, but it escalated, and they did. Intention for murder can occur very, very quickly. So that seems to have been the case.
Exactly. You don't have to sit down and plan it out. It doesn't have to be some sort of planned hit. But I mean, if you engage in a joint enterprise, which means that the murders, 2 people are involved basically in the murder, it doesn't automatically matter who struck a killing blow, for example. And I mean, the example of that would be that we have many people in prison for murder in this country who would have driven hitmen to a scene. Yeah. The hitman would shoot somebody and get into the car and they drive away, but that's considered joint enterprise, that both people had to be involved for it to be carried out. Exactly.
And the judge made that distinction to the jury that it's not just being there isn't enough, but that you have to be aware of what is happening, and that these actions are likely going to result in someone's serious injury or death. And that's what the jury found in this case. So as you said, it was very haphazard, but they obviously concocted a plan then, and evidence unravelled Alan Vial's lies, because they both tried to claim different things. But essentially what they can summarise happened was that after he died, it was claimed that he died very quickly from the blows, but it was later found that he could have been bleeding for 15 to 20 minutes, that he wouldn't have died instantaneously from this. This was also disproving Alan Vial's theory with pathologist evidence. But basically it was heard how they said that they brought him over a low fence at Sliabh Liag, and Alan Vial had originally claimed that he left him there and that he may have rowed himself into the sea. But obviously we now, the jury were happy with the prosecution's case that they threw him over the fence into the sea. But what kind of undid them was the messiness and the chaoticness of this attempt to clean up, but essentially the rock which had that had Robert Wilkin's hair and blood on it, that they tried to throw this over the cliff, but it actually didn't go that far, so they couldn't dispose of it. They were obviously highly intoxicated. The rock was later found in the car, and then they also took €1,000 of cash from Robert Wilkin's pocket that had been received from a job that they had done. So they robbed him before they discarded his body, and they also tried to throw personal belongings like a watch and I think it was a necklace from Robert Wilkin into the sea as well, but they didn't do it properly and it was kind of discarded as well.
I mean, it's bizarre sounding, but they obviously this is the murder weapon, effectively, a rock. And I don't know if it's late at night or something, and they seem to have sort of tried to throw it, and when it didn't go over, they just left it there.
Yeah.
Like, it's very, obviously a man has died, and it's deeply tragic, and we heard from his sister in the victim impact statement, but it's almost ridiculous, some of the evidence.
It is. And then I suppose what happens next is even more ridiculous. So obviously they said that they watched the body roll, and then eventually it disappeared. And, it was later heard, because it took, as well as, this bizarre situation, like, it also took the ghost card 8 days to find him.
Yeah.
That actually they had to get crews to abseil down the cliff, where they found a bloody jumper belonging to Robert Wilkin. So this is the level of, chaoticness that was going on. But obviously they took the items that didn't go anywhere, that didn't go over the cliff, including the rock, and it was in the car. So what happened was they proceeded to drink a lot and continue whatever state they were in. And then the next day, Alan Vial basically crashed his car, causing injury to Nikita Burns. And then the Gardaí came, and what really started the investigation being pointed at them was that the rock was in the car. So they left the rock with his blood and hairs in the car. There was also a cleanup. They'd attempted to clean the blood, but there was so much blood. The guard was like, "This isn't from a minor crash." So the guards immediately alerted the detectives in the local police station. And then after she was released from hospital, she suffered minor injuries in the crash. Nikita Burns proceeded to a friend's house, where she basically said she battered a man with a rock, and that she actually said she enjoyed it. Now, she later retracted that and said that she didn't say that, but she said that to the friend. And then she also called another friend and also said that she had done this, that this man had been killed, and that, she was worried about blood being in the car. And she said, "If I go down, I go down." Now, she later tried to blame it on Alan Vial and said, that she was pressurised. She said that she wasn't involved in the murder or disposing of the body, but she helped clean the car. But obviously these statements to the two witnesses helped convict her, because Robert Wilkin, the victim's sister, actually referenced it in her statement. She thanked those two people for coming forward with their statements.
Yeah, so I mean, we probably never know exactly step by step what happened.
Yeah,
but the jury are convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that both people played a role in this murder.
Yeah,
I mean, you're only those two, I suppose, know for sure who did what on that moment.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, I mean, Robert Wilkin, obviously we spoke about the fact he was facing serious charges, and that was obviously referenced at the time with the newspapers, because there was a suspicion, at least initially, that when he went missing, that it had been in connected with the drugs trade or something of that type. But I suppose we heard a different side of his personality from his sister when she gave a victim impact statement, more kind of humanising, I suppose, what he was like and what he had meant to her.
Yeah, and I think that's very important, and that is a big purpose of these victim impact statements, because obviously it's the state's job to present a case, and the emotion and the actual person at the centre of the murder always, disappears a bit. It's focused on the perpetrator. So this is why these victim impact statements, they're there for the family supports as well, but they do really kind of help bring the personality of the person into light. And because another thing that Alan Vial had originally claimed to Gardaí was that the three had gone to watch the sunset at Sliabh Liag, and that Robert Wilkin had actually tried to sexually assault Nikita Burns, and this had led to the fight. Now, he later said that wasn't true on the stand, but obviously that's something that's harder for the family to hear. So today, basically, the sister of Robert Wilkin spoke about him and kind of thanked, the jury for seeing through their lies, and basically describes the killers as calculating, as cold, and basically said that they dumped his body over Ireland's tallest cliffs as if his life was worthless. They also said that, they showed not a shred of remorse. And she also spoke about how it was tried to portray, that I think Nikita Burns had said to somebody, hopefully his his body is never found and his family don't go looking for him. And also Alan Vial had made some ironic remark about, he always wanted to be buried at sea.
Yeah, this is the bit that she pointed out, him kind of mocking his death even.
Exactly, yeah. So she basically was saying, it suggested that he was estranged from his family. And she said that wasn't the case. She said we all were getting on with our lives. She said, he had gone down his own journey, but, they were still, it was herself and two brothers, and she said, just because our paths had sort of veered away, it didn't mean that he was still our brother. He still deserved, to reconnect with us, to have the later years in life with us, and that was taken away from him. So she basically said that, that wasn't the case, that, he was estranged.
Yeah. I mean, just to read a bit of her victim impact statement, she says, "Nothing or no one could have prepared me for the evil and harrowing details I've witnessed. To sit in the same room as those two very cold, calculating individuals has been so difficult. The fact neither of these individuals has shown a grain of remorse has been very overwhelming at times." So it just shows, I suppose, the trauma of going through that trial. I think she did say that the verdict had brought a degree of closure.
Yeah, and it was said as well that she was there every day, and this trial went on for I think it was several weeks, wasn't it? It was a long trial.
I think it was possibly up to 3 months, but
because there was over 200 witnesses originally called anyway. So it was a very long trial, and she was there every day listening to this. And they did try and cast aspersions on his character, and obviously there was a lot of things heard about, what had been going on, the drinking and all that. So it's always sort of obviously when the defense is trying to vindicate somebody, oftentimes a victim can be portrayed in a negative light, and this is hard for her and her brothers to hear. Obviously,
certainly for the claim of an attempted sexual assault to be brought in. Yeah, that must be deeply hurtful for the family.
Completely untrue as well, obviously.
Yeah. So with Alan Vial, we heard obviously a bit about his background. Even during as he was charged and awaiting trial, he was back before the courts for was it drug driving or drink driving?
Driving under the influence of drugs, yeah. I think he had cocaine and cannabis in his system. So Alan Vial's 39, so he has a string of convictions. He lives in Australia, as I said. He has convictions there. He has convictions for possession of drugs, possession of a weapon. So serious enough convictions, as well as loads of driving offences. But essentially what had happened was this murder took place in June 2023. In February, so 4 months before he killed Robert Wilkin, he had been caught in Donegal driving really dangerously, and he was eventually stopped by the guards, but there was a load of different dangerous manoeuvres going on, and when he was tested for drugs, he tested positive. Obviously, he was arrested. So then the murder took place while he was awaiting this case. So essentially, while he was on remand, he was convicted of this particular, I think it was driving under the influence of drugs and dangerous driving charges as well. And he was banned from the roads for 6 months. But a couple of months before this offence, he was also found to have basically led the guards on a chase. He took a lorry and he tried to go towards the border, but it was across Donegal. And the guards obviously followed him. So he was also convicted of this only a few months before. So he's been before the courts a lot. But this would have happened while he was awaiting a murder trial. So
with Nikita Burns, obviously a much younger woman, we didn't hear as much about her background or anything.
No, we didn't. We heard things about, we heard about mitigating things, about how she was basically saying that she felt pressured by Alan Vial, and that she did ring her brother at one point and tell the brother that, I'm in a relationship now, I'm doing better. She obviously had her struggles. It was heard how she had a lot of mental health difficulties. She had suffered from bipolar disorder, from anxiety, from depression, and that, she tried to assure a brother that she was doing better, she was in a relationship, but he seemed to take from from the calls that she was drinking during the day and became worried about her. And then obviously then this all happened. So she seemed to have had a chaotic life and her own difficulties, and obviously seemed to have issues with drinking. And then obviously when she met Alan Vial, things became worse, and then it resulted in what happened to Robert Wilkin, essentially.
So a very sad case overall, and it's those two people now will serve a mandatory life sentence. And presumably Nikita Burns will be in one of the couple of main female prisons.
Yeah.
We have to again commend Robert Wilkin's sister Irene for speaking out in this way.
Yeah, because she stood in front of the media, which is never easy to do. And, her brothers were with her as well. But yeah, absolutely. And we hope now that they can put this behind them. And, I suppose they do. It's always going to be life for murder. So at least they know that these people won't be out for a long time,
Yes. Okay. Thanks very much, Eimear.
Thanks, Niall.
Robbie Lawler was out of control.
This is Double Cross, the murder of Robbie Lawler.
It was going to be an all-out war with him in the middle of it.
A Crime World special investigation podcast based on my new book, Web of Betrayal, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Nicola Tallant and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.